In a world governed by the relentless march of time and the apparent certainty of cause and effect, we often take for granted the idea that every event is a link in an endless chain of causation. A leads to B leads to C, in an unbroken line of deterministic progression. But what if this notion of causation is not the whole story, and instead, this seemingly solid chain of cause and effect is merely how we perceive the world around us, but not the way the world actually is? Is causation something fundamental, or merely an attempt of our minds to make sense of the complex tapestry of physical nature and the events in our lives? Centuries ago, the philosopher David Hume challenged our innate belief in causation. He argued that what we might perceive as cause and effect might actually be a habitual pattern formed by our observations of events occurring in a sequence, rather than a tangible, observable link. While Hume noted that we unquestionably experience correlated events which seem necessary and deterministic, are the connections we perceive in the physical world truly causal in nature, or are they simply patterns we've come to expect based on past experiences? Correlation does not imply causation, but then since we only observe individual correlated events, what grounds do we or can we ever have to assert that there is causation? The evidence we have is just what we observe, and correlations that we can observe within that. We don't observe causation, it's an extra assumption and one that we don't actually have real evidence for. But if correlation doesn't imply causation, then what does? What does causation even mean aside from mere correlation? How do we know it's not just completely made up, a fundamentally bogus notion? Hume pointed out that the psychology of humans is that we are very much prone to think that the way things have been before are the way they will be in the future. This was good insight for his time, although science has of course understood this well in modern times. The Pavlov's dog experiment, for example, shows that a dog can be trained to salivate when a bell rings, just by conditioning. If you ring the bell enough times and give the dog food, then next time the bell rings, it assumes it will be getting food, even if this is not in fact the case. This ties in to what's known as the fallacy of induction. Inductive reasoning, or induction, is when we extrapolate a pattern from observed cases to unobserved cases. One example being making assumptions about the future based on the past. The term black swan has become a customary way to refer to rare unexpected events which are possible but do not fit the patterns of the past or what has been previously observed. Until 1697, Europeans believed all swans were white. This is because every swan anybody had ever seen in Europe was white. But when Dutch explorers arrived in Australia, they made the surprising discovery that there exist black swans. One very notable example of the black swan phenomenon is that of the stock market or other financial markets. Past performance is not an indication of future returns, something that many traders and investors have learned the hard way. Any reasoning that assumes something about something unobserved based merely on what has been observed, or assumes a generality from finite instances alone, is flawed in this way, including, as David Hume pointed out, future events in the physical world based on past events. So, does the past really cause the future? And if so, then how? And what even is causation? Well, since Hume, several philosophers have tried to answer this question. David Lewis had a theory that there are infinite possible worlds, a kind of multiverse where every possibility is realized somewhere, and that one event should be said to cause another if, and only if, had the first event not occurred, the second event would not have occurred either. If, in the closest possible world to the one we are in, but where the cause doesn't happen, the effect doesn't happen either, then it's true that the cause causes the effect. In essence, he suggested that causation can be understood through the lens of what-if scenarios, examining the dependence of one event on another. If it hadn't rained, the plants wouldn't have grown. Others, such as Patrick Supers and I.J. Good, have suggested that causation is about probabilities rather than strict determinism. Maybe causation is past events changing the chance of future events occurring. But the challenge in responding to Hume's skepticism is that any theory of causation must operate within the realm of what we can observe and measure. While these modern theories of causation may provide richer frameworks for understanding what causation is, they may not fully escape Hume's fundamental point that our understanding of causation is ultimately rooted in patterns of experience and observation, rather than in a direct apprehension of causality itself. So even if these accounts may make sense of what causation actually is or what the world means, they don't solve the underlying problem that Hume posed about induction and how we can know or have evidence for causation, assuming it is real at all. So we have to consider maybe it isn't. But what about science? Doesn't that predict the future? Newtonian physics, formulated by Isaac Newton in the 17th century, presents a universe of deterministic laws. In the Newtonian picture, the universe is a grand clockwork, a masterpiece of determinism. In this deterministic view, the future unfolds inevitably from the past. The trajectory of every apple falling from a tree, every planet orbiting a star, follows a predictable path governed by unyielding laws. F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration. Yet, since the early 20th century, quantum mechanics has shown us that events are not determined by past states, if we look closely enough. There is a form of unpredictability at the fundamental level of reality. The future may simply not be determined until it happens. It's well known in modern physics that the deterministic mechanics of Newton are not fundamental. It's just the statistically most likely way for things to behave at the macroscopic scale. That's what Newton's equation F equals ma actually describes, the expectation value, or the average of a large set of random observables. Like, if you roll a dice, a 7 is much more likely than a 12 or a 2, but it's just random. Each roll you never know what's going to come up. 7 in this case is the expectation value. So, is the universe just random? Is causation merely an illusion? Well, there is another idea. Psychologist Carl Jung described the concept of meaningful acausal events, which he termed synchronicity. This is when two events that are not understood to be causing each other occur, but we see some meaning in their coincidence. You know when you are thinking of your friend and they suddenly call you, or the same name or number keeps showing up in a seemingly inexplicable way? Could causation then just be a narrative or a meaning that we assign to events that occur together in our experience? I.e., is what we call causation really just a very commonly occurring type of synchronicity? The Hermetic principle that all is mental offers an intriguing perspective. The Hermetists state that the connections and meanings we find in life are not grounded in physical causation, but are instead transcendental. While Hermetic teachings do speak of cause and effect as a real fundamental aspect of existence, in this case, it's not that the past physical events cause future events. The effects that we see in the physical world actually have causes outside the physical world. Much like a movie projected onto a screen, where the cause of the unfolding story lies not within the screen itself, but in the projector beyond. To the viewer watching a film, it looks like one event causes the other. This guy shot that guy and then he died. The driver turned the wheel of the car and the car turned. But the relation of these chronologically ordered events is not real causation. The image is projected as a whole from beyond the two-dimensional surface of the screen. The projector doesn't even know the difference between cars and people. It's all really one image, and it's only in the mind of the viewer that there is any separation to speak of. This is an idea similar to one that was already discussed by the philosopher Plato in ancient Greece, who used an analogy of a cave and people watching shadows on the wall, really projections controlled by puppet masters, and the poor ignorant souls watching inside the cave are duped into believing that the show they are watching is the true reality. Another popular example is the simulation hypothesis, the idea that we may be living in a simulation. In the movie The Matrix, humanity is unknowingly living in a simulated reality created by machines that use us for their own purposes. In a simulated world, everything we perceive as real, the events, the people, the laws of physics, are creations of a computer program. In this scenario, what we perceive as deterministic causation, the past physical events causing the future, is actually an illusion. It's a scripted sequence in a grand simulation, All events past and future are controlled and manifested by the computer. The fundamental laws are not laws of physics, but laws of the computer code.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
The idea of a computer simulation serves as a great metaphor for transcendental causation. Just as the projector creates the images on the screen, the computer in a simulation generates the reality we experience. The true cause of events in such a world lies not within the world itself, but in the external system, the computer that is simulating it. But let's take this idea a step further. What if instead of a physical computer, the simulating force is consciousness itself? Drawing parallels from the Atman concept in Vedanta, the ancient Hindu spirituality, we can understand our reality as a manifestation of a universal consciousness. In this view, what we perceive as the physical world and the causal relationships within it are actually expressions of a deeper conscious reality. This consciousness is not just a passive observer, but an active creator, shaping the tapestry of existence in ways that transcend our conventional understanding of time and causation. If causes can exist out of our physical plane, how does this reshape our perception of the universe and our place within it? The ancient Hermetic principle of as above, so below offers a profound insight here. It implies that there is a correspondence between the macrocosm and the microcosm, between the universe and the individual. This principle suggests that the patterns and laws we observe in the physical world reflect greater truths that exist on a higher level. Amit Goswami, a physicist known for his work in quantum mechanics, introduces the concept of downward causation. In this view, the cause of events at the quantum level is not merely a series of physical interactions, but includes influences from a higher level of reality, that of the consciousness itself, a realm in which the physical plane exists as an object within our perception. He argues that since the physical observer, think physical body, is existing within the physical world, there arises what is known as a tangled hierarchy, a hierarchy that feeds back on itself. How can an observer, part of the universe, be observing the universe itself? Such a self-referential paradox is known to require a higher transcendental level, or inviolate level, as described by Douglas Hofstadter in his book Gödel, Escher, Bach. Look at this drawing by Escher. The hands are drawing each other, but what it depicts is of course impossible. The only way this image exists is that it was drawn by a third hand, one that exists outside of the picture. This perspective aligns nicely with Jung's idea of synchronicity. If the causation of events originates from a higher plane, then the meaningful coincidences in our lives might be manifestations of this transcendental causation. Perhaps they are causally connected after all, but they have a common transcendental cause rather than a temporal deterministic connection on the physical level. This is a picture in which it is our lives and our perception that gives the structure to what is going on, and that the physical universe is just an aspect of that experience. It's all caused from above or outside the physical domain, just like the projector or the simulation. Note this doesn't mean that there has to exist some mysterious world somewhere else. This isn't necessary. The transcendental plane can just be the consciousness, the physical world being a kind of illusion, or rather just the way that information is structured within consciousness. Perhaps the true nature of our existence is not bound by the physical laws we think we know, but is instead a creation of something far more fundamental and transcendent, which happens to exhibit the features described what we call physical laws, but which are really just tendencies. From quantum mechanics to the ancient philosophies that see consciousness as the ultimate reality, these ideas offer us a richer, subtler view of existence. On a personal level, these ideas challenge us to rethink our understanding of our own lives, the decisions we make, and the connections we forge. Collectively, they encourage us to view our world as an interconnected whole, where each action, each thought might be part of a greater, more intricate design. On a collective level, embracing a view of the universe as an interconnected whole influenced by consciousness or a higher causative force could inspire a shift in our global worldview. It could lead to a deeper appreciation of our interconnectedness and perhaps a more holistic approach to the challenges we face as a species.